Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 2, Episode 11, Chords and Melody.
Okay, Eric, so I wanted to have a conversation with you today about these two separate skills that come together, your ability to create melodies and play harmonies. So this will be really useful for people playing a piano or a guitar or some kind of instrument you can have multiple voices on. But this could also be useful for like a trumpet player who wants to learn to arrange. But it's often just most practical to do this at a keyboard or a guitar. So we can take a melody that already exists and learn how to put chords over it, learn how to put functions over it.
Yeah.
So let's say I had this little melody. That's my recipe. I'm just adding chords to it. And by knowing your essential functions, you can really do that with most melodies you would invent that don't get extremely adventurous with note choices. But I think that as a skill is such a foundational thing that beginning piano players or beginning guitar players should learn how to do, because what this will do is it'll glue in your knowledge of essential functions with your knowledge of tonal patterns. But this problem that a lot of people have is going from tonal patterns to melodies. So it's the other side of this equation. It's being able to take a set of chords, maybe 1, 4, 5, and create melodies over them. And a lot of people struggle with this, I think, because they hear their melodies that they're coming up with tonal patterns. They don't sound like real melodies you would just naturally sing. They almost just sound like exercises. I'm sure you've experienced this with trying to play jazz. So the reason I like separating these two skills in my mind is that when you naturally just sing a melody, we often sing things that are very melodic in terms of stepwise motion. But I find that once people start to... So if you sit... I was just playing mi, re, do. I was thinking of mi, re, do. If I know that when I'm playing mi, I have access to all my tonal patterns, it changes the way I play this. So it might go like this. That might be what I'm intuitively just audiating, and I might change it to this. So really all I'm doing there, I'm jamming in a little tonal pattern. And so that can work with unaccompanied soloing, or you can actually accompany yourself. If you know what function goes with that part there, you learn to add the function in. But what I've yet to really see is a systematic exploration of this, like just a very simple, learning to play scale-wise melodies, let's say in major, with just 1 and 5 covering the notes. I mean, you play piano, so you've been through this process yourself.
Yeah. What you're saying is you're going to start with just a melody, a simple melody, and then take your chord choices, or I like to call them function choices, because chords are like the F7 or B flat. Those are the naming the notes of those are chords, and then functions are tonic dominant, right?
Yep.
So, and of course there's both. There's the keyality and tonality. So that's what I'm using to also name our name the functions that we're using. So they're functions. But yeah, so if you got a melody, what functions go with that melody? And then expand your choices of what functions. So maybe that your melody might not necessarily fit every note, fit a function, but that there's also maybe some passing tones or appoggiaturas or these other things that you can do to, create some tension in your melody or in the harmony, because of course it's a dance between the two.
I really like what you said about having different harmonic choices. So a beginning student, when they think of if their melody is going to highlight the tone mi in major, they're going to think of tonic functions often that go with that. But I mean, there's a bunch of functions that could theoretically hold mi in the melody very safely. I mean, even the 2 chord. I think of once you start exploring in your harmonic vocabulary, and I like that term, harmonic vocabulary, starts getting bigger, you start hearing different functions could go over tones that you used to only think of like 1 and 5 going with.
Yeah, do 4-5-1, and you'll have a major 7.
Like so
I mean,
you
right,
this.
just
You made it like this.
yeah. So that's one way. You
Yeah,
could
I can think of a lot that would.
Yeah, 6.
That could be 5 of 6. So just. I did a little suspension there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one skill that you can learn, where you're taking melodies that are already made either by someone else, or you're improvising them. But in either case, you're learning to very rapidly either add harmony to that, or make the melody more embellished by using the tonal pattern that the harmony is implying. And that's another part of that skill. But I mean, really, the trick here is to start infinitely small, and I think that's why people aren't often really getting a hold of this to the point where they can improvise just random stuff with one hand on the piano and the left hand just knows where it's going intuitively. And I think if you start with just take do re mi and try to teach your student the 1-5 chords that could support that, and then later on maybe you add fa in there, and then you add so, and you just keep going. And if they can do some basic improv, just scale-wise, stepwise improv, they'll pretty rapidly be able to harmonize their own playing.
Yeah.
But if you don't start small enough, if you just try to get them to do the whole, like all the tones in major with 1, 4, and 5, it's overkill, right?
To begin with, for sure.
To begin with, yeah.
So yeah, no, just like you said, mi, re, do, but you go re, mi, do. Right? And mi, do, re, do, right?
Ah, exactly.
And then expand that, and then do the same thing in minor. Do, ti, la, right?
Exactly. So I've been exploring this with a lot of my students lately, and yeah, it's really cool to see what they come up with that. So the reverse of that skill is to be able to take those functions that you know and really improvise or play some predetermined set of functions and then come up with a melody that goes over top of it at the same time. So it's really the opposite of what we're saying. So either you're going to be improvising and the melody's coming from your audiation and you're kind of using everything else you know about music to bring some functions in, or you're going to be really audiating the harmony at the center and trying to add little other things on top of it.
Yeah, they're completely different things.
They're wildly different.
It's amazing that it seems on the surface, well, that's the two skills, the harmonies and melodies. Now put them together. Well, which one's first? Do you write melodies over top of chord changes, or do you write chord changes that matches your melody?
They are really different skills.
Completely.
They are really different skills, and just because you're good at one does not mean you're good at the other one. I think what's most commonly taught is taking a set of functions like a blues progression or something else and learning how to improvise over that. But the problem with that is, what do you do when you are improvising your own melodies and you want to compose your own tunes? How do you know what functions go with that? And there's a wide range in your ability to do that. Some people are so good they can have the functions follow them on the piano with their own improv, and some people need to actually compose and take a step back from the music being played in real time and think about what to do. But my only point here is that this skill set, it works very well with MLT, because you want to start small and master tiny skills and make sure you can audiate them. So eventually these two skill sets start supporting each other, but in the beginning they kind of have to be learned separately.
Totally.
I'm really advocating using Gordon's method, using Gordon's theories to learn counterpoint is what I'm saying. But counterpoint in a way that's not arbitrary, like sixth and all this stuff. Rooting counterpoint essentially just in essential functions.
Yeah, you're just making a melody over top of a function that's already predetermined, or the opposite. You've got a predetermined melody. Now, what functions are available for you? And then what, first of all, just do tonic, dominant, tonic, mi, re, do, and do, ti, la, tonic, dominant, tonic. And then what else do? Well, do 4-5-1, do 2-5-1, do, 6, whatever.
One of the coolest thing is taking a really adventurous function and putting it on top of a tone that's actually quite standard in the tonality. So putting weird functions over do in major. So I just put like a minor 4 over do. And that can really spice things up. Or putting big 2 over do. Or putting, 5 of 6. And I find that can help pin your ear to how adventurous the function is when you hear it over a certain tone. I mean, I think I mentioned this a while ago, Eric, but if you take one tone like do and see how many different functions you can put over it.
Put all of them.
And then take re and put as much as you can. Holy smokes, it's a very interesting exercise. But you have to build your vocabulary. So what I'm recommending here is start small, build your vocabulary, and kind of know what's in your audiation and what's out of your audiation, right? And so when you're experimenting, you're taking things that you can't really audiate well, but you're trying to teach yourself to do it, that's fine. But you should also keep in mind, I can actually audiate 1, 4, and 5, or 1, big 2. But I find that's useful to
and there's nothing wrong with exploration. You're saying experimentation, which is the same thing, but you're exploring. And that's how you eventually get to improvisation. You've got to start with some kind of exploration. And these are really simple in one way, simple ways, although it might not be simple technically to take your audiation and get it on your fingers, or the other way around. And then what you just do is find things that tease your ear and you love, because then it'll bring out more of the personality of what your most liked functions are that are outside what typical harmonizations could be. But before you get there, do 1-5-1, do 1-4-5-1, get these things to go with the melody that's there, and then start expanding that and use the dominance of the diatonic functions. Start to get there. And if you do just that, you've done a whole ton of work, especially if you start to do it in at least 4 up to 4 flats and 4 sharps, if you want to say that, or go Dorian and start expanding. We'd start with the essential functions in Dorian, and then add a couple functions. Now, those don't tolerate, these other diatonic tonalities don't tolerate dominance of their secondary functions that well. Or at least that's where my audiation cuts out, because I haven't done that. And I haven't found anything that I really like.
I think different tonalities have different characteristics in that light, which is basically what you said. I mean, major can handle a beating in terms of secondary dominance.
And minor, pretty much, too.
Minor can, but even major can handle more than minor. It's
for sure.
Wild.
Yep.
But, something I've noticed, if you're improvising with Lydian sounds good with very abrupt changes in keyality. So you just keep playing Lydian in different keyalities. It works very well for that tonality, but Dorian, I don't get the same pull of interest if I just keep switching Dorian very fast like that. So that's for me something that Lydian, and I hear this all the time, composers doing this, they'll move a Lydian a minor third up keyality, and they'll just keep playing in Lydian, and it gives this very dramatic effect.
So let me add something else here, because
sure, yeah.
One of the things I love to do the most, because I'm so solid in 1-4-5, and
sure.
and in the tonic, subdominant, subtonic of Dorian and Mixolydian, and even in minor, if you're sometimes using the dominant and sometimes using the subtonic in minor, that I like to go among, major, and then so it's do, and then re, the resting tone for Dorian, and get there in a nice way, and then also using D minor. So D minor, D Dorian, and C major, and I have a melody, and I harmonized it, and it just made so much sense to just follow, play songs like Erie Canal. That's what I'm trying to think of. It just abruptly goes from minor to major and back, and that's not parallel. It's the
relative.
It's the relative one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of having songs that explore both. I think that's something that's very useful for pre-composed songs. And I know, Eric, your curriculum has stuff like this, like what you just said, where one song goes from major to Dorian to minor. One song goes from like minor to another minor keyality. One song goes from like minor to parallel Dorian. Like you mix it up, because that's how people are going to learn this stuff.
Yeah, my kids got to the point where they had most of the functions in major, or all of the functions major and minor, and then Dorian and stuff by itself. And then I wrote stuff that I just enjoyed playing, and I taught them the functions, and it was pretty simple to expand their harmonic vocabulary by now, just establishing the essential functions in a tonality and finding a function that operates as another kind of function in a different tonality or a different keyality. Mm-hmm. And you just have to practice and find what you like, and develop, the possibilities that are outside what are, inside your typical vocabulary, or the one that you're comfortable with, and start expanding from there. I'm not sure that it makes more sense to go more functions in major and more functions in minor, before you can do, just take major and eventually get to Dorian, or take major and eventually get to Mixolydian. And they're pretty easy. You can find out that you don't like that. It's not a meaningful change to you to do that, or it is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways you could go, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you go to Dorian and Mixolydian, or do you go to like secondary dominance and major?
See, that's
first?
a tough one.
Why not just everything? I guess like, there has to be some sequence, but you can have people listening to both long before you formally label all that stuff. So I mean, listening, the answer is just do it all. But in terms of what skills and content you're going to teach,
yeah. So we kind of jumped into composition.
Yeah.
So that includes, you get to make up the melody and you get to make up the harmony. And then which one comes first? What are you more comfortable doing? I'm almost always making the melody first.
Yeah.
And then adding the functions. And then the functions are guided, but often my choice of functions is guided by the lyrics sometimes. Like it's a lullaby and the kid won't go to sleep. Well, that's a dominant with a flat 9. And the next time the kid's calming down, so now it's instead of that flat 9, now I'm doing a 4 chord, a minor 4 chord the next time around, because now the kid's settling down to go to sleep. So you've got a little more tension, less tension, and then the kid's asleep, and then I go from there to back to Dorian. It's a Dorian lullaby that's in my songbook.
Oh, interesting. So something like this
I can play it.
That's your flat 9 in major, and then
it's
4 chord.
Let me play it real quick. I'm going to turn up my speakers here, so see if this comes through. little one, why don't you please go to sleep and go sleepy bye.
Let's go.
You know, I had no
I love
intention of
doing
teaching
it,
my
geez.
kids those functions, but when they're second graders, and I taught them in one day, and I had the four that got it the best come after school one time, and they're like so excited to know that that's re, do, re, you know, so re. They just knew that, and then change do to so, and then go to do, and so this is how I teach improvisation, which should be a whole. There's fun to put down for another episode. How do you, right? How do you have these, modulations?
Mm-hmm.
How to teach modulation using roots.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that fits together with the things we were talking about earlier. You know, playing melodies over these tough functions, and then having a melody and supplying the functions to them. And you just have to do the work to get it, to be able to understand what your fingers are doing.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about Andy Mullen for a sec here, because Andy's own MLT curriculum has this stepwise pattern content in it that I'm a big fan of, and I do think Andy's onto something here about there is often a disconnect between having an ability to create or improv with tonal patterns versus tonal patterns and stepwise motion. And this, I haven't heard many people talk about this, but the skill that we were covering today about being able to hear a tone and then audiate a tonal pattern or a function that would go with that single tone in the context that you're in, that takes time to develop, right? Like to intuitively just hear the tone mi and all of a sudden just have an insight that, that is a minor 9 off the 4. Like to know the function that goes with that. Or major 7 off the 4 or whatever. And this conversation about stepwise patterns, it comes in there because often when we naturally improvise, we do it with stepwise patterns. Like if you hear people just whistling, they're usually not singing things that sound like pure tonal pattern exercises. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There's actual like movement in their lines like that.
Yeah, and to know whether you're going to use a passing tone or do a different function, right?
Exactly.
Mary had a little lamb. It'd be 1 5 1 5 1, and that's stupid.
I agree.
But now that's just thinking theoretically, because nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, that's the issue with this, is that you actually have to do this from a very bottom up approach, right? And I think, Eric, your work about the importance of hearing blocks of harmony, not just tonal patterns but actual functions. It's important to do this, because if you can't even recognize a function when you're listening to it, how are you going to use that when you're improvising?
Yeah, well, improvising using tonal patterns and improvising knowing functions are two different things.
Exactly.
Because the tonal patterns don't have to match the function necessarily. You've got other things you can do, and especially when you use stepwise. So that's where your comment about Andy is completely valid. It's like you need to have, small lick vocabulary. There's nothing wrong with playing melodies.
Exactly.
These tiny melodies before you play. We all play big and sing melodies, so why not just learn a little bit of melodies and learn where they fit and where where the harmonic function works or doesn't work with those melodies. And even if it doesn't work, wiggle your way back to where it does. That's a little bit more advanced skill. But when you hear something that strikes your ear funny, make it right. It's the Miles Davis kind of thing, right? There's no wrong notes. There's just wrong resolutions. Is that what he said? Or somebody else did?
There's no wrong notes. They're only in the wrong places.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Or there could be the right note in the wrong place, but you can also say, well, that's always going to be the right note if you have a way to resolve it. by
for sure.
emphasizing the mistake. Like, that's what I wanted to do, and here, now learn it.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I think that's an interesting topic, especially for teachers to explore themselves, because we're trying to help our students develop this. But I think at some level, if you're a piano teacher or a guitar teacher, you need to have some mastery over these basic things before you even start. I'm not saying you have to have supreme mastery before you start teaching them, but you got to be one step ahead.
You want to be ahead of your kids in that, and you definitely want kids who have their basic vocabulary down to start creating, and ultimately improvising more, but have ways of teaching them these exploration activities that give them, some more roots, some more functions, some more melodies that are a little bit like technical exercises, small little root melodies, small little melodies, and small functions.
It's such a great one that is, maybe we'll finish with this, a great root melody lick that is in almost every genre. If you take 1, 4, 5. You'll often hear the 5 chord. You'll hear this is so common. It's in rock, it's in jazz, it's in country, it's in Mozart, it's in Bach. It's insane how common that is, that line. But those are great examples of, that is a piece of content that it's not a tonal pattern, and it's not a piece of harmonic information, but it does go from 5 to 1, and it shows up everywhere. You just start knowing it, and that's why I think Andy's onto something. There are cliche stepwise patterns that are worth just committing to your audiation and knowing, that that's going from so to do, and gluing that in with your audiation. It's fun to do.
Oh, for sure. So, get your function patterns together.
Mm-hmm. All right, Eric, till next time.
All righty. Thank you.